Are you an early stage founder revolutionizing the future of retail? Then you're in the right place. My name is Sapna Shah, and I'm an angel investor investing at the pre-seed and seed stage in retail tech, e-commerce, marketplaces, and consumer. I'm also the founder of RetailX Series, an ecosystem to help early stage founders in the retail and consumer sectors. RetailX Series includes events, a YouTube channel, a Slack community, resources for founders, and this podcast. In this podcast, I interview founders, investors, and experts in the retail space, and we dig deep into the tactics around key topics that early stage founders want to hear about. Welcome to the RetailX podcast. Hello, everyone. Today's episode is a little different than our usual topic. Today, we're talking to Matt Hornbuckle, co-founder of Stantt, who will share his experience in making a 4-day work week the norm for his menswear startup. Some of you might remember Stantt. I interviewed Matt's co-founder, Kurt Keel, back in 2020 about how Stantt managed its wholesale sales. Today's topic is in a very different space, as we'll touch on the rationale and logistics in successfully implementing a 4-day workweek culture without sacrificing sales. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Very excited to be here.
Very excited to have you. So let's start with some background. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about you and your background?
Absolutely. So I graduated from Bucknell and went immediately into working at Johnson & Johnson in brand management. Spent about 7 years there on a variety of different businesses and brands, focusing primarily on strategy and product innovation. And after about 7 years, Kirk and I left the corporate world to start Stantt, which is a menswear startup focusing on custom clothing and using data and technology to make that process faster. And it's a space we had zero experience in. So we've learned a lot along the way and tried to use our naivety to bring in new ways of thinking and new ways of doing business in the space.
Great. So tell us a little bit more about Stantt. How long have you been in business? What categories do you offer and what distribution channels are you in?
It's wild to say we've been doing this for 10 years now. I have a few more gray hairs than when we first started the business. But we've scaled the business now to a place where we offer most garments head to toe for men. We started with dress shirts, which is still the lion's share of our business, but we also now offer pants, everything from fine wool, Italian dress pants, down to jeans and chinos and more casual wear. Same thing for shirting. Also have suiting and tailored clothing. So we're really trying to cover a majority of the customer's closet. And the business is omni-channel. We do a lot of business through wholesale. We're in about 600 doors right now. Most of the specialty men's stores across the country, as well as Nordstrom, Dillard's, and Bloomingdale's. We also have our website, Stantt.com. And then we've done a number of pop-ups over the years. We're not doing anything in that space currently, but it's a channel that we found very, very effective for us and something we're excited to explore again in the future.
Great. And how big is the team today?
So we're at 12 people today.
That's very lean.
In this environment, and all about stability and profitability versus fundraising these days. So we try to keep things really lean and mean.
That's a topic for a whole nother podcast about profitability and not fundraising for businesses like this too aggressively. But now that we're talking about fundraising, how many rounds of fundraising have you raised to date? The spoiler here is that I've been an investor from the very early days. That's where I tell everybody that I have a vested interest here in Stantt.
Even though you didn't want to take the first meeting with us.
That is fair.
We got you to drink the Kool-Aid. We're very excited to have you on the team. So we've done 3 fundraising rounds over the decade that we've been doing Stantt. We also did Kickstarter to start things. That's not part of those 3 rounds, but that really got us that initial batch of customers and very preliminary proof points around the needs in the market. But as I alluded to before, in the current marketplace now, in the fundraising environment, we're really focused on stability and profitability while still maintaining a strong growth rate.
Great. So that's excellent context. Thank you for that. So let's shift our discussion to the meat of this episode, which is the 4-day work week. And I'm sure every startup founder who's listening to this right now is thinking, there is no way you can do a 4-day work week for a startup. That's just impossible, especially with such a lean team as you have. Let's start with what drove the thinking behind trialing a 4-day work week.
In the end of the day, the team is everything. And that's what I think makes or breaks most businesses. And we're fortunate to have an incredible group of people that are part of Stantt. And Kirk and I have always been focused on from day one creating an amazing culture. And we found over and over again people were getting burned out. And there was that not only the working 5 days a week, a lot of people would start working into the weekends. And you start hearing about companies try the 4-day work week. There is a natural level of skepticism on our side, to say the least. But we decided to try it. And I think it's been an absolutely incredible tool for us, both in terms of making the organization more efficient and how we do things, staying way more focused, but also in terms of overall employee happiness and being at Stantt.
So when you first trialed it, at that time, you mentioned that you were skeptical about it. Did you think it would work, or did you think we're just going to do this and it probably won't work? So this will just be a test that we're running?
We had a high level of confidence that it would work. And we wouldn't have tried it if we didn't think it was going to work. I think that would have been a poor decision to dangle this carrot in front of the entire team and say, hey, you can taste this really amazing work-life balance at our company and then take it away. So we did think it could work from the very early days. But it took a lot of consideration and a lot of thoughtfulness. It's not something that you just turn on overnight and say, all right, we're working Monday through Thursday. Everything else is going to happen the same way. So we put a lot of thought into it and started out as a trial. And we were very, very transparent with the team around, hey, we're going to try this out. We need to make sure it works for you. We need to make sure it works for all of our customers, right? We have 600 doors we sell through. There's a lot of salespeople through those doors, as well as our e-commerce customers. We need to make sure it worked for them as well. And we are still providing amazing service, which is something we're known for.
So I'm glad you mentioned service, because that seems like the hardest part of this, right? That a business that is so dependent on customer service can't just be turned off, right? So how did you initially set up this test with the 4-day work week, with service being a concern, and if there are any others? And how did you manage that?
Great question. That was easily the biggest concern we had going into this. The first place we started was just soliciting input from our team. We started with our leadership team, say, hey, we have this idea. What do you think about it? What do you think will work well here? What are some of the challenges? And that was the first area that came up, was how do we make sure we're still providing best in class service? And then we had very similar conversations with the rest of our team. And in the end of the day, people working in the US work 5 days overall. So there is a level of expectation for responsiveness on Fridays, and even to a certain degree over weekends. And the way we started it out from day one and have maintained today is we do have on-call Fridays for specific individuals that rotates around. So we don't have a 4-day work week at all times. If you're happen to be on call one Friday a month, you're probably doing about a half day, just making sure you're providing that high level of service. But then you're not expected to do other things for the company on those days.
Got it. And then what was the reaction from the team as you were trialing this and, for example, talking about the on-call Fridays?
They loved it. Who doesn't want to work 4 days a week? I think it's one of those, there's probably, speaking for them, there's probably a level of skepticism. It's like, oh, is this too good to be true? But I was excited about it too, right? Not even having to speak for them. I was excited to potentially have a third day of my weekend every single week. And it truly has brought about a new level of enjoyment. And while still having an organization is still very, very effective.
You mentioned that you were more efficient, right? So you have to be more efficient in those other 4 days if not everybody's working the fifth day. So what were the kinds of things that you did to become more efficient?
Yeah, the very first place to look are meetings. And I'm sure everybody listening to this has some PTSD as it relates to meetings. And I remember at my Johnson & Johnson days, I could get through a 50, 60-hour week and have 30 hours of meetings, 40 hours of meetings, and barely any time to get anything done. So even day one from running the company, given our experience in the corporate world, we tried to be really lean with our meetings. but we saw that there's a natural creep happening with them. So as soon as we looked at the week with this lens of ruthless efficiency around, hey guys, we only have 4 days, we started cutting meetings, we started shortening meetings, we started consolidating meetings. And I think that was a fantastic exercise and a secondary benefit I wasn't expecting in just reducing that overall meeting load. Something else we did, and I wish we had done this earlier, even working 5 days a week, we instituted a no meeting Wednesday day. And I'm a huge believer that the most impactful work you can do often requires focus and thought. And the way we're all set up today doing work, you don't get that very often. So I think that no meeting Wednesday is an incredibly important part of the 4 day work week, but also even if you are doing 5 days, having those days where your entire team, including yourself, can dig down and focus on those big meaty projects is incredibly, incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's really interesting because as you were talking about this, I was thinking I should institute a no meeting day and I could get a lot more stuff done that day. I think it could benefit all of us. Okay, so you're in the middle of this trial. You've worked through all of these kind of the meeting cadence and the no meeting Wednesdays, but you're in an apparel business that also requires sort of seasonality, trade show seasons where a good portion of the team is going out to market, traveling, maybe all hands on deck at certain trade shows. How do you account for those periods in terms of the 4 day work week?
Really great question. And that was the other big area that came up when we started soliciting feedback from the team is what about trade show season? And for folks who aren't familiar with the apparel industry, that happens twice a year. It's called market. And it is a very, very intense period of time because it really sets the stage for the next 12 months of your business and securing orders and new business. What we chose to do during those periods, it's about a 4 week time frame. We actually go back to 5 days a week. And we recognize that both from a fairness perspective, right? Particular individuals, primarily the sales team, it's full steam every single day, but also just the needs of the business where there's a ton of sample preparation, travel preparation, meeting preparation, scheduling appointments. So we felt it was appropriate to go back to a 5 day work week for about 2.5 months out of the year. And then we quickly shift back into the 4 day week.
That's really interesting. And so there's some flexibility here.
Correct.
But what about weekends or things that might happen like trunk shows or things like that, that might be occasional weekends? Again, in your business, that is a thing that happens.
Absolutely. And trunk shows are a very, very important part of our business. For folks that don't know this, it's basically where one of the individuals from your team works at the store for a period of time, typically 1 to 2 days. There's some level of promotion happening and the store tries to bring in a lot of their clients. So you can do a lot of business on those days, but it's also incredibly important for building relationships with the stores. So it's a very, very central tool for us. And what we try to do with those is just be fair to the team, right? If you're working on a weekend or on a Friday, which inevitably happens again a lot with the sales team, it's, hey, take some extra time one of the upcoming weeks or take a full week off here to really balance things out. We also have no vacation policy. We trust our team to work really hard and take the appropriate amount of time off. So we try to provide a lot of flexibility for those folks who do inevitably end up working a couple of days on a weekend.
That makes a lot of sense. And now you've been doing this kind of 4 day work week for some period of time now. You've gone through some of the ups and downs, the market and trade show periods. What other considerations have come up or learnings or issues that you weren't expecting right from the beginning?
Yeah, I don't know if there were any unexpected issues that we've seen yet, but I think the big thing, and one of the things I'm so glad we did, was just get the team involved from day one, right? And understand where the hesitations were, where the excitement areas were, and then also put it in writing. So we wanted to make sure that, hey, team, this is a trial, right? That this trial is going to run from this date to this date, and then we're going to reevaluate. It might not continue. We want it to continue, but putting that in writing, soliciting feedback from everybody, I think was the most important part of this. And if anything was a surprise, I think it's how smoothly it went, honestly. And once we really thought through things, proactively rescheduled the meetings, consolidated our goals, really kept a lot of focus. I don't want to say it went off without a hitch, but there were very few hiccups along the way. Occasional missed phone call here and there with an upset customer. It actually led us to upgrading our phone systems and buttoning up some of those pieces that would prevent it in the future. But it's been an absolutely wonderful thing. And I would recommend everybody gives it at least a shot to see how it works.
That's so great. So you mentioned a couple of the missed phone calls. How are you measuring success? Is it in employee happiness? Is it efficiency? What are the metrics that you're tracking to measure success of the program?
Yeah, I think the two biggest areas are happiness among our team first, but then also happiness among our customers, right? Making sure that they're getting the level of service they expect. So we do the typical culture surveying as well as we do surveys out to our stores twice a year and just to get that actual quantitative feedback component. And then I think with our internal team, it's a lot of the softer conversations, right? We do try to interact with our team as much as possible, facilitate feedback at one-on-ones proactively versus waiting for review periods. I would say it's been a huge success overall based on the metrics, but also just the softer side of how people are feeling. Again, I don't want to speak for them. Some people think differently, but I do think it's been a pretty big success overall based on what the numbers are showing.
Do your customers know that you're on a 4-day work week? They'll know now if they listen to this podcast.
Right.
But
Yeah, I think we try to be transparent with this all. I think that's a really important part of all of this. And on the end of the day, it's really not much of a different experience for them. And if something truly, truly urgent comes up, we will be there. And I think in the end of the day, at least what I tend to do is set expectations where, hey, there's so much urgent stuff happening, but often it's not truly, truly urgent and can wait until the following week or following day. So I think it's, again, set expectations with everybody and then solicit feedback and make sure it is working. And maybe there's different ways it has to be tackled, but we're adamant on our customers staying as happy as they possibly can. And I think we've been able to maintain that through the 4-day work week.
that's great. Knowing kind of everything you know now, is there anything you would have done differently when kicking off the 4-day work week?
I started it sooner. It's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but look, it's one of those things I think you heard about it a little bit before COVID. COVID, I think, started accelerating some of those conversations. And I wish we had given it a shot sooner and see if it worked or not. And I'm so excited that we did try it, but I do wish we had started it sooner.
Let's say the team, you've 12 now, right? But let's say the team quadrupled in size to 100. Do you think that would make it easier or harder to run a 4-day work week?
I think there's the inevitable complications of a more complex organization, right? But I think in the end of the day, assuming you have a really strong team, it starts with that. I think the principles still hold true around maintaining a high level of efficiency during the 4 days that everybody's on. I could imagine there being more movement around, hey, there's more people doing full days on a Friday, let's say, and then taking another day off during the week to balance out a higher load of customer service. But I think it can still work at really all scales. Now, I'm saying that again, we're a relatively small team, so it could be naive to say that, but I think the principles are the same overall.
I think it might be harder with a smaller team. I think it might get easier over time. That's my gut, but I don't know. I'm a team
More
of one.
redundancies and things like
Yeah,
that.
more backup, especially when people get sick or have to be out for personal reasons or family reasons on non-Fridays. Was there ever a thought for the day that you don't work being a day other than Friday?
We definitely talked about that when we kicked this off, and we did talk a lot about hey, we might have some people full day Friday and then fully off on Monday. And I think one of the things that is happening are Fridays in general across the corporate culture in the US are becoming summer Fridays year round. People are definitely still working hard, but I don't think they have the level of intensity overall that they used to across the board. So I do think it's a natural fit. And it's also a great way just to lean into the weekend a little bit early and just start having your weekend and being able to relax that one day early versus it being like a Wednesday in the middle of the week where you're just a random day off.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, this has been great, actually. And I think you've been really helpful in giving the how and the things that make it successful. But is there anything else? Is there like, for thinking about the audience that's listening, early stage founders with probably small teams, is there one critical piece of advice you would give them as they start to think about implementing a 4-day work week, no matter the size of the team?
Enroll your team from day one. It's something so important. Instead of going to them and saying, hey, we're going to do this, say, hey, we have this idea, or I have this idea. We want to get your thoughts on it, and really enroll them in the process. So it is truly a team decision in the end of the day, which I think something this foundational is critical that the key folks are involved, and most of the people on the team are involved. So say get feedback really, really early and enroll them in the process. And part of that is setting expectations and put it in writing and make it very clear. So there's no question around if it's a test period or not, if it is, what the days are, what it looks like in terms of being when we have our on-call Fridays versus fully being off on a Friday.
That's great advice. And that can probably apply to a lot of things, not just 4-day work week, but
Yes.
engage the team early. Amazing. Okay, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your advice and your tips on the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
And thank you for listening to the Retail X podcast. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Retail X Series, check out www.retailxseries.com for more information, including recordings of past events. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Retail X Series. You could also learn more about me, find fundraising resources, or submit a pitch deck at www.redgiraffeadvisors.com. Thanks, and catch you next time.